But I tell every single parent, if you're not willing to fight for your kids' education like their lives depend on it, because they do, you need to pull your kids out now. And even if you fight for your kids' education like their lives depend on it, it's irreparably broken right now. It's going to take decades to fix these schools.
Hi everyone, this is Veronica Kirilenko of the New American Magazine. America has long arrived at the point where one of the most unsafe places for children to be is a public school. From poorly equipping children with valuable lifelong skills to poisoning them with hateful Marxist critical race theory and sexual perversions, public schools became tools of indoctrination and social engineering. And if you, as a parent, dare to ask questions about it, then you are viewed as a problem. Today, I'm joined by Shawn McBreairty of Maine First Project. Shawn is also known as America's most dangerous dad. Shawn, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
You, sir, have been making national headlines for at least a couple of years now. Please tell us your story. How did you earn the most dangerous dad in America title?
Yeah, America's Mom, Sharona Bishop, actually coined that during one of our podcasts, and she said I should probably trademark that or copyright it, whichever one it is. But I'm just a dad of twins who, back in June 2nd of 2020, our school received a letter from our parents received a letter from the school saying that we were all educational terrorists. So basically, that was the beginning of the process, right? We were all white supremacists, and we didn't know what we were doing. And the whole email that came out was from an equity committee. And so that was sort of the beginning of me waking up to how bad these schools were. I thought I lived in the best little town in Maine and the best school system in Maine. And at the time, my twin daughters were juniors. And so I very politely pushed back on the superintendent and said, as Minneapolis is burning to the ground on the heels of George Floyd's death, what about parents taking this on? And what about the First Amendment and peaceful protest and freedom of speech and the police departments being top notch in our town? And I very quickly received an email back from the superintendent that said I wasn't woke enough to understand what I was talking about. So as I did more homework, I found out very quickly that the school system in my town, Cumberland, Maine, where I lived for 22 years, had hired an anti-racism partner who effectively said, in order to eliminate racism, we must eliminate capitalism and move to a socialist and anarchist form of government. So I was blown away at what I was finding. And I was finding these things out through Freedom of Access Act, which is called FOIA in some states. But it's your right to know. It's your right to know public information. And honestly, Veronica, the more that I found, the more concerned I was, and the more the school started pushing back on me.
So it was not just this partnership and the letter that you received as a parent. What kind of evidence did you uncover that the critical race theory was taught in your daughter's school?
Yeah, and critical race theory, the way that I define it pretty simply is anytime that they are pushing skin color over content of character. So these schools were dividing classrooms up into oppressed or oppressors based on the melanin levels in your skin, the color of your skin. And if you had a darker complexion, you were oppressed. And if you had a lighter complexion, you were an oppressor. And that was, shown at birth. So we saw a lot of information coming from the school. And they were starting this in kindergarten with very specific books all about skin color. So what we found over the last 3 years is the Maine Department of Education, and I would say any of the departments of education in any of the states in America, started to push this divisive critical theory or critical race theory onto kids as young as 5 years old. Now, these kids can't spell blue, but they know if they're an oppressor or oppressed. And that then started to kind of move into me having this adversarial relationship with the school board and ultimately learning more about my First Amendment rights and the ability, again, to have free speech. And that's one of the things that I've really tried to assist other parents in the country with, is being able to step up to the microphone and be galvanized in your approach, that you can say almost anything you want about anyone you want, including teachers or counselors or administrators of schools. And so this became, again, an adversarial relationship over about a year, and ultimately became a global story because I was exposing them so bad on this critical race theory that they decided they weren't going to allow me to go to my twin daughter's now senior high school graduation.
You were not allowed to go to your daughter's graduation, sir.
So that's, yeah. So that was how they started. Basically, about 2 weeks before then, they said I could not attend the graduation. I could not attend my girls' final band concert on campus, and I couldn't see the giant photos of their senior pictures on campus either, because they had essentially given me a no trespass warning.
Because you went to the school board meetings and exposed them. You
Yeah,
just exercised your First Amendment rights. And
right.
this is what happened.
I was willing to go to jail, honestly, for my First Amendment rights. I didn't want to go to jail, as my wife can attest to, but I was willing to do that because how can we expose the horrific nature of these educational systems, these K through 12, government run public schools? How do you expose it if you can't go to the source? And in Maine, the school board has two jobs. It's to create policy and to hold the superintendent accountable for the running of the school. So when you go to the superintendent's boss and say, hey, this shouldn't be happening, and unfortunately, we've allowed these school boards in Maine and across the country to slowly be sort of behind the scenes taken over by what I would call mostly Democrat-driven socialist progressive agendas and super liberal people who really want to create this divisive nature within our schools. And their ultimate goal, honestly, and many of these are useful idiots. They don't really know what their place is in this role. But ultimately, what they want to do is they want to destroy America with the next generation of our children. And they're doing it with our tax dollars. Ultimately, to kind of button up the critical race theory story, parents and taxpayers, patriots across the country sent in emails and called the superintendent, and ultimately he curled up in the fetal position and caved on all of the issues that he had demanded, that I wasn't going to be able to attend the school graduation. And the graduation went off without a hitch. We ultimately moved back to my hometown where I live now. And I just kind of pressed pause. I quit my job. I just wanted to decompress because between graduation, selling our house, and all of the other things that were going on, a lot of liberals attacking me and my family for my position, which was simply the truth. I just wanted to kind of decompress for a while. So I moved back to my hometown, and it wasn't shortly after I moved back here that many of my old friends said, hey, you spoke for parents down in Cumberland. Do you know how bad the Hamden school system is? And I kind of, just put my head down and said, no. And that's where we got into this hypersexualization. So critical race theory is bad because it divides you on skin color. It's really easy to see. And so hypersexualization of minors, to me, that definition is anytime a school employee is talking sex with a student, with a minor student under 18, beyond the points of the state mandated sexual education class. And what's happening is they're also starting in kindergarten. The Maine Department of Education actually put out a number of videos that we had broken last summer with the help of libs of TikTok, one of which said that Pride Day was as important as the 4th of July. And they said things like, doctors make mistakes with the gender of the babies when they're born. And so, we kind of started out with this political correct speech decades ago. And then we went into this everybody gets a trophy mentality maybe 20 years ago. And now we're at this mentality where you can pick your pronouns. And in San Francisco, there's 93 of them. So hypersexualization of minors and that discussion of sex, something that, again, these kids should be held innocent until the very last opportunity, was being really pushed by the 2022 Maine Teacher of the Year as appointed by the Maine Department of Education. Again, we're going to kind of wrap these into a ball here in a minute, but the students in this class, 11-year-old students, were pushed books on anti-father, anti-police, LGBTQ, transgender, and hardcore kiddie pornography in middle school. And they were doing prizes and incentives and daily announcements.
And 11-year-old.
11-year-old kids. I mean, I can't really remember what I was doing at 11, but I imagine I was either playing out on the playground, playing basketball, playing wiffle ball, baseball, whatever it is. Now these kids have the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and thoughts of suicide. The mental illness in Maine and across the country in these students has never been higher, because these schools are pushing biblically bad principles. And you mentioned the lack of morality. That's where it all starts. Any parent, any taxpayer, any teacher who believes that talking sex with a minor child in school is something that is necessary is absolutely insane.
So CRT, sexual content, graphic LGBTQ materials don't come out of nowhere. So besides school boards, what are the organizations and associations that support and promote these materials and activities in schools?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is across the nation, the NEA Teachers Union, we have a version of it, the MEA, Maine Teachers Union. They're pushing this radical agenda. They are essentially taxpayer-funded arms of the Democrat National Committee. And again, between Maine School Management Association, which we'll touch on here in a minute, the Maine Principals Association, the American Library Association, the Maine Library Association, National Association of Social Workers, the American School Counselors Association, they're all pushing this hypersexualization divisive process where they're literally saying out loud, they will keep secrets from parents about the sexuality and the pronouns and the gender transitioning and things like what we found in Little Damariscotta, Maine, a town on the coast of Maine, a very quaint town you'd love to visit with 2,500 citizens living in it. A mom discovered a chest binder in her 13-year-old daughter's bedroom given to her by a school social worker who essentially said to this child, this 13-year-old girl, we're going to call you a different name at school. We're going to use different pronouns and sexually transition you. And I'm going to give you this chest binder so it will constrict your breasts as a young woman, as developing a woman, because he said that she could be a man. You know, that's the biblical evil that's happening in these school systems right now. And parents seem to keep their head buried in the sand.
Well, exactly. We have perverts, possibly pedophiles, who knows, mentally unstable adults, right? People who are definitely groomers and child abusers, because you cannot be a normal person if you give a girl a chest binder and be a normal person, right? So
Well, yeah,
where are the parents in this situation? Are they kept in the dark? Do they choose to look the other way and pretend everything's fine? I mean, I see you fighting tooth and nail. Where are the others?
yeah, I think Maine, like the rest of the nation, is in this three-part play as parents or taxpayers. So the first part is exposure, and we're kind of stuck in that part because not enough parents really know what's going on. And I would also say that many parents don't truly want to know what's going on. I think many parents feel like there's something happening in these schools. The educational results have never been lower and our taxes never higher. So our return on investment has never been worse for this public education system, which in Maine is $3 billion. And I think parents, if they really knew what happened inside these schools, behind the brick walls, they would have to make a life-altering decision to pull these kids out of their public school and either send them to a Christian or private school or homeschool them. And not many parents are willing to do that. They may not have the means, they may not have the time, but I tell every single parent, if you're not willing to fight for your kids' education like their lives depend on it, because they do, you need to pull your kids out now. And even if you fight for your kids' education like their lives depend on it, it's irreparably broken right now. It's going to take decades to fix these schools. And I say they all figuratively need to be blown up and start over. And without things like educational freedom or school choice, depending on how you define it, these things are never going to happen. But to really answer your question, three-part play, exposure is the first part. And I would say 90% of Maine parents have no idea what's happening. The second part is speaking to solutions and trying to solve for the problems in school. And very quickly, you'll find that these socialist leftist school board members are not going to want to hear from parents. And that gets into the lack of transparency. And then thirdly, educational freedom is really how we solve for this. And you've got to take back your local school boards. In Maine, local control is where it's at. So a local school board can, again, provide the direction to the superintendent and create policies to get rid of all of this hypersexualization and just simply get back to the basics. In Maine, only 1 in 4 kids can proficiently do math. Only 1 in 4. And only 1 in 3 kids can proficiency read. They can read at proficiency. So we have this entire situation where, again, the results of a business would never be able to survive, but somehow parents are allowing these schools to say, well, it's only really important that 1 out of 3 kids can read.
Mm-hmm. So on your Instagram account, you describe yourself as an advocate for educational freedom and more toxic masculinity. What is this latter part about? And I think I already know the answer, but do you think that schools help boys grow into real men?
Well, I think what's happening is you've seen what I would call a lot of beta males. They're, an alpha male to me is simply a strong, confident, morally found father. The toxic masculinity is kind of a joke. It was actually included in a local school system who's suing me for my First Amendment rights. They actually took it, I think, off my Twitter feed, and it said something like, and he approves of toxic masculinity. What I really believe in toxic masculinity to me is just simply masculine men, fathers, coming out and providing direction for their family, being good spouses, husbands, and parents. And, I like the outdoors. I have a dog and a pickup truck, and I own guns, and I snowmobile, and I love America. And so it is interesting to see that this toxic masculinity aspect is sort of taken this political stance or this, political mantra, but it's simply just being a good, sound father or man and doing your part to make sure that you're raising kids appropriately. And I think a lot of the kids, unfortunately, that don't have a strong father around are falling victim to some of this trans cultism that's going on in the schools, which is really a neo-Marxist religion. And again, their whole intent is to divide America by dividing the moral fabric of families, and really from the next generation, just destroying our country from the inside.
Well said. Sir, I would like to thank you so much for your time today. Please tell us what's the best way to follow you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Twitter at Shawn McBreairty, I host a podcast called Maine Source of Truth. I've had over 36 national experts all around the country talking about educational issues. And there's a Maine Source of Truth Facebook page that any parent, especially Maine parents, can go and look at hundreds and hundreds of examples of what's going on. And then lastly, I do this volunteer. So I've told everybody I will never take a penny of taxpayer dollars, but I am fighting for my rights and your rights and everybody's First Amendment rights. So I have a GiveSendGo account. It's givesendgo.com/Shawn McBreairty. And every dollar that anybody pitches in will go to our legal offense fund, and also trying to speak to other parents across the country and in Maine to help them really define what's important to their children. And ultimately, the educational aspects need to be improved. And I think the only way that happens is to pull them out of these public schools.
Thank you, Shawn. God bless you. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching.
I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa. Who knows what would come out of that?
It isn't the Constitution that's the problem. It is the people who ignore the Constitution.
What we need are just more people that would read the one we have.
It's up to us to hold our elected officials accountable,
who understand the Constitution and are willing to take a stand when necessary.